international conference on public procurement that was held last week, and Angela Syke has joined us, and I believe that Prof. Theo might be joining us as well. If he's not already on, I will check now. But welcome, Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Just give us a bit of an insight as to how did the conference go last week? What was it all about? Why did you hold it? Over to you.
No, thanks. So, first of all, this conference has been coming on for a year or two now. So initially, I want to say thank you to the NRF team, which is Ron Lebogan, that launched it last year, the first one, and this was Procurement Innovation for Africa. That was very successful. So following that, there was a need for more insight because everyone was asking the question, what's next? And then last week's conference was the result of that. And that led to us hosting the Methods and Specifications conference that was held. And I hope all of the participants today could at least join online or better yet in person. And it was very fruitful. And I think a lot of the people can relate to the topics that were discussed. So it was one of a very well managed conference, and thanks to you, Sean, and Prof. Theo, that was spearheading the conference from the background. And yes, I heard all good things thus far. And just to give you some purpose for it, so I think there were a few gaps that we've uncovered over the years where methods and specifications are not really discussed on, in a general format, and just for other people to share their experiences. So this was potentially one of the good opportunities for Africa as a continent, as well as South Africa, to lead a conference of this nature. And we felt it was fitting that we have international speakers that can relate to this topic and also share their experience and knowledge to us that are still venturing through this whole procurement phase of innovation, because there are pockets within South Africa that does innovation. And one of the business units where I worked at, we do have innovation happening on a daily basis, but it's not really discussed or shared with other colleagues within South Africa or even Africa. But this was a perfect opportunity to share what we've done and also create that opportunity for people to ask questions. So this was, in essence, two conferences in one, because we had the specifications, the methods, which is independent in a way, but you need to have this discussion simultaneously when you do start with any of these activities. So just to give you some key aspects or takeaways that I had for the methods. So, and I presented on this as well, and stating that our SEM practitioners, they only make use of the common ones that are available. And these are generally open competitive tenders. And this is purely based on them avoiding audit findings. And it prevents innovation in a way. So it's nothing to do with them not utilizing it. It's just the risk of not complying with it. So I think discussing it, that did give them some confidence and some support that you can use various methods. But I think depending on the institution that they're with, they may consider it, but it's still their decision. So one of the key aspects that were discussed at the conference was the framework agreements and the beneficial use of these things. And me being involved in procurement for a very long time now, you tend to shy away from framework agreements. It's too complex, but the way it was presented and delivered, it made perfect financial sense, and it creates efficiency within the organization from the top to the bottom. So it's a very good mechanism to procure, and I hope the colleagues will make use of it. One of the other aspects that were discussed in methods was the public-private partnerships. I mean, we had the Gautrain coming out speaking about the advantages of having it and utilizing, which is great. I mean, we saw the benefit. I mean, I make use of the Gautrain, and it's an ongoing thing that can be utilized by the public and ensuring continuous investment in South Africa. And then also sharing some other knowledge of African countries making use of the public-private partnerships, which is beneficial to the country. So within the methods, in general, overall, I think clear communication to the market is important, because without that, the market won't understand exactly what you need. So I think one of the achievements to achieve that is accurate and solid drafting of specifications. So the market understand fully what you require. And also you as an end user know exactly what your expectations are and what you'll expect. Then the other aspect was the specifications component of it. So the takeaway that I took from this is most institutions are not geared in terms of resources to focus intently on the specifications. Because if you have a very good drafted specifications, the likelihood of anything going wrong is very low. So they did also speak about techniques to achieve this, but I think the resources in the organizations, institutions are required to assist with these things. Because like I said, if the specifications are correctly drafted, which they should be, there shouldn't be any issues going forth. And even, verifying the information or even the delivery thereof on completion. So resources are key to ensure that specifications are met. So there are other aspects to this, but I think I'll stop there, Sean.
Thanks.
I'm
Thanks,
happy to
Angelo.
answer any other questions.
I mean, do you have any numbers? How many people registered, attended?
Yeah, geez, it seems this was the most attended conference in the record of Prof. Geo, using his words exactly. So I think it was over 400 people that participated. And that was a good turnout. And like I said, thanks to you and Prof. Geo, it was greatly attended.
Well done. So that 400, by the way, is, and we'll invite Prof. Theo to come in now, 400 online, plus around 200 in the room. So that's probably in total about 600. I don't know. How does that compare, Prof. Theo, to other academic conferences that have been held in South Africa in the public procurement space?
Morning, Sean. Morning, Angelo, colleagues. Yeah, look, it's funny. I've actually just this morning been sitting and crunching the numbers, Sean, and when you log off from this webinar, you'll find my report on your inbox. But it's incredible. I mean, just the numbers we know, and I see Chad just put in a very good comment there as well, which I've also put into the report. That's not even counting the YouTube followers, right? So it was live streamed there as well. And I've just posted in the chat for everyone. The link is there. So if you missed anything, firstly, where were you? But secondly, don't be left behind. Go and watch it. It's fully available on the NRF YouTube channel. So we're talking about over 600 at the height. And Sean, to answer your question, this is way above anything we've ever seen in public procurement of this nature in South Africa. And I can tell you internationally, this is really up there in terms of the numbers that we're looking at, especially for an event that was primarily an academic event, right? This was not a trade show or a training opportunity. This was a high-level academic engagement, but with very real practical implications. So this is by far the biggest we've had in South Africa. Even just the 570 people that we had up front just registered, before we went into it, it's by far exceeded anything I've seen in South Africa in terms of participation. I think, as I've also said a number of times now, that it really bodes well for the interest that there is now in public procurement in South Africa and globally, focusing on what we're doing in South Africa from a very broad public procurement community. And I think, the NRF should really be congratulated in driving this initiative, which I think is fully kind of really aligned to their mandate also in terms of what they do in our country. And I think this is just such a great example of not just talking about these things, but actually doing it. So I think in terms of numbers, a great success.
Prof, I mean, why an academic conference? I mean, why at this time, why an academic conference? Is this just getting a bunch of professors and things to speak about their research? I mean, why an academic? Why is it important? Why was it important to have it at this time?
Yeah, so I mean, as Angela's also said, we are at a critical juncture, firstly in South Africa, in terms of developing a brand new system. I mean, everybody on this call is probably very much aware of the act that's came out. We are now in the process of drafting the regulations. In my view, this is probably the most important phase of this kind of process we're in. And I view this process really, as I said yesterday at the Smart Procurement in Durban as well, as the reset button having been pushed in South Africa on public procurement. And if we don't see it like that, I think we will miss a very important opportunity. I am cautiously optimistic that this is what is going on in South Africa. We've seen with state capture and with lots of other things, you must just read the AG reports, that our procurement system has just not been working. And we've now pressed the reset button collectively through our parliament. And that was, I mean, the act is really only pressing that button. Now we're in that process of working out what does this mean on the ground. And if we are not serious about, taking this at the highest level, learning from the best insights that are available at the moment, both in terms of practical insights, but of course, that's where academia really comes in, right? Really the best theoretical insights. While we are building this new system in South Africa, it will be a tremendous opportunity lost. So I think, firstly, it is really important so that we can have an evidence research-led intervention in this space, so that we know we're not just designing something because somewhere somebody might think this is a great idea. We've actually got solid justification, research, evidence-based justification for why we adopt one approach rather than another. And there are sometimes advantages of not being at the front of development and being a little bit late in the game, as we are in South Africa. We need to acknowledge it, right? All our neighbors have had consolidated procurement statutes long before we've had it. The advantage of that is that we can leapfrog, right? We can learn from their experiences. We don't have to go through the same level of pain in developing a new system, which is always there with the new system. This is really what this is also about, learning from experience. And everyone who attended last week would have seen that very practically happening, especially our international guests telling us, don't do this, do this.
Yeah.
Or, we've done this. So I think that's very important. The other thing that I've also found very important, had lots of discussions over coffees and teas with lots of people at the conference, is just to also show, I think, especially for the South African practitioner contingent, that look, the things we're struggling with and the things that we're trying to do is not unique to South Africa, right? People think we're the only country in the world that does preferences. Not at all. We had somebody like Professor Benjamin Rosa from Michigan, an economist from Michigan, telling us in detail about the US's experience and experimenting with preferences in their system. So
set-asides, yeah.
Set-asides. No, people think that set-asides are this new thing that only South Africa. No, not at all. So it also helps us to just think a little bit broader, to think beyond our own little small world, but even just inside South Africa. As Angela has also said, there are really pockets of excellence, of top-level practice. And we're also often insulated from each other. We don't know that the Gautrain Management Agency is doing some really stellar stuff in how they put together their structures, and we just don't know about it necessarily. So sharing that is very important. But I must also say then, the other really important thing is that it's not just about South Africa. Yes, that's our primary focus. It's the South African National Research Foundation. We focus on South Africa. But it is also an international conversation. These things are internationally being considered. It's an ongoing international conversation. And we are rightfully taking our place in the international, on the international stage, in making contributions to that conversation, saying, look, we are, as your previous guest said, we are not just consumers of what is being, developed elsewhere in the world. We are participants in that process, and we've got a lot to add. We've got a lot to share. And I think for that reason, it's also important.
Good. Thanks, Prof. Look, I got a lot of insights. You've put onto the chat the link to the recordings of the 2 days on the YouTube. There have been some questions around how do we get hold of the presentations? What are the plans on that in terms of distributing the presentations? That's a question that we're getting. I mean, great. So you've said we're making a contribution internationally. Maybe some thoughts on what you might have we've got back from some of the international speakers. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so perhaps just if I quickly jump in there. So as we also said at the conference, we will be sharing all the presentations. We've got it all now together. We're just in the process of packaging it neatly. And then everyone who registered will receive an email from us as we've shared the details of the conference itself to tell them where they can go and access the actual presentations. Of course, as I've posted on the link, the actual whole event is just on YouTube, so you can go and look at a particular presentation if you're interested. We will also create an online presence for the program, the presentations, and then links to the YouTube channel, and we'll share where that will be so that people's got a permanent kind of place to go and have a look at where it is, and we will cross-reference the program with the YouTube video so that you can immediately go into, if you just want to go and listen to Renee King's, in my view, absolutely mind-blowing presentation on a systems engineering approach to specifications, then you know where to go. We will do all of that, and all of that will follow in due course. Those of you that missed it, just keep an eye also on this channel. Sean will also share all of this with you in due course, as we always do. So that's coming out. And then perhaps just very quickly, I mean, people can go and read. I've posted in the chat also the link to Chris Eukens. And those of you who don't know Chris Eukens, he's one of the global leading scholars on public procurement. He's on his international blog written a very good piece reflecting on the conference. I think that's excellent. You can quickly go and have a look there at his views. That's completely independent of us. But I mean, just, reflecting on one more, Gianluigi Albano, who is a section head at the Italian Central Public Procurement Agency concept, but also a leading scholar attached to a number of European universities in this area. And I mean, he posted on LinkedIn, just as a general comment, he said, without any risk, and I'm quoting, without any risk of exaggeration, it has been one of the most intellectually rewarding and personally heartwarming experiences in my public procurement globe-trotting life. Coming from somebody like that, who's internationally a leading both practitioner and scholar, I think says a lot about what the NRF achieved with this event.
Absolutely. And the fact that Prof. Chris Eukens, who is, this is one of the books he's contributed to, and there are many others that are out there, took the time to, on the weekend, after traveling back from South Africa, to put together a fairly comprehensive blog on his takeaway is quite something. And you've put that link in the chat as well. Martin agrees with you. This should be placed in the international context to benefit from lessons learned elsewhere. So thanks, Martin Medford. I have a couple of things here, and just to quickly share with you a little video. This is on day 2, and just keep a lookout on the NRF website and mine as well, just to give a little bit of a sense of what this is about. But this is a 2.5-minute summary of day 2. You'll see day 1 will be coming out quite shortly as well.
There are rules around criteria that we should be transparent as far as they're concerned. We should be fair, they should not be biased.
50% of projects that fail do so because of poorly written requirements, whether they're incomplete, ambiguous, unfeasible. These are the greatest areas that we have to project risk, and the second biggest area being in interfaces.
A PPP would basically say a build, operate, transfer, for instance, will mean the private sector is to build, operate, manage the project, and it bundles it together into one contract.
These PPPs, as we put them, we have that the last word that simply says the asset then transfer back to the state. But what typically happens at that stage is that we have to answer the same question we have asked ourselves 20 years earlier. And that question is, what is the best way of implementing this asset?
I think this kind of solutions and this kind of decisions are extremely important for the everyday usage and the power procurement experts dealing with these issues every day.
Another issue that you may run into or that we run into in the US is that there might not be enough small businesses available to do the required work.
Public procurement is not only about buying of goods and services. It's also how do we use that expenditure to achieve other developmental objectives.
In our own strategy, we said, look, we need to capacitate ourselves and others, and if the stuff doesn't exist, we'll make it.
There's just a sense, folk, of day two. Look out for day one. Here's a couple of my takeaways. I mean, certainly in the method space, there's a rich body of knowledge that's out there. Methods are going to be integral to public procurement. We've got a very specific focus within the Act now on methods. It's going to have to be there. We're using a lot of methods that aren't legislated. That's going to have to change. Very interesting perspectives from Juan-Luigi Albano on the use of a single platform. Some very practical points that Ember Thumberan raised around the transition that we're going to have with that. Jantri Sankar spoke about disposals and income generating methods and shared some really insightful points there on experiences from Eskom. Dr. Dolores Cucina-Messina spoke about the Other Transaction Authority. This is a method which is not an exemption, but it uses another authority to allow a particularly complex procurement to happen. And there was certainly a lot that was raised by Professor Chris Yerkens on a broad agency agreements, CSOs, CVIR, and a whole range of those things that were there as well. Santi Roy gave some interesting points around some of the innovations that she's seen in the health and construction space. And of course, you want to have a look at what the team at Soraya have done on the square kilometer array in South Africa and how they've done that. And that was a presentation by Angela Seiss. So certainly some there. Specifications, body of knowledge, not as mature as methods. I mean, just as Prof. Kino said, the presentation by Rede King, you want to have a look at that because there are some techniques in there that for many of us were absolutely mind-blowing. The PPPs, yes, we got PPPs, but what was so interesting for me is the focus that they've had on output-based specifications. And they spoke through there how they have found that to be completely different to input-based and has given them a very different perspective. Just the focus on sustainability criteria, Prof. Tunda Tetra gave some really insightful points there. Don't miss that one. And then just criteria for services. There was a panel discussion led by Prof. Kia on that one. And Dr. Tebogo Makube just spoke about localization, local production, local content. So just a couple of key points on that one. And just to encourage you, there's a wealth of knowledge that's out there. It's been captured. Don't forget about it. Go back to it, review it, use it as a rich resource for yourselves to just get up to speed with some of the leading academics, the thought leaders that we've got globally and locally on this space. Any closing comments, Angelo and Prof. Kino?
Yeah, so one of the closing comments that we had, it's what's next? And I think everyone is waiting for what the NRF has planned. So there were a few topics that were mentioned in the closing. So I'll just recap on the ones that I made a note of. So is best practices in supply chain, value for money, sustainable procurement, and transformation. So look, these are the topics that were mentioned, but I think perhaps through this platform, you can perhaps see which ones attendees would like to attend next, and then we'll take it from there.
We'll certainly do that. And we heard also some other suggestions around looking at technology as well. And sustainability, green procurement, best practices, etc. There's a whole range that we need to look at. And we'll certainly look at some structured way of getting some input from others that are stakeholders in the process. Prof here?
Yeah, I mean, just from me, I think what is really important is to keep this momentum going. I think it's really grown very quickly and very promisingly. I think what we are now starting to see in South Africa is a maturing community of practice, where there's a kind of an annual schedule or an annual program that people are becoming familiar with. And I think that in itself is really important for us as a community in South Africa to know that there will be these learning events that you can kind of diarize, you can keep your eye open for those. And that in itself, I think, has got a very important developmental purpose to play in our system as we are growing towards a more mature procurement system. It feeds into all the other pathologies we've got in South African public procurement. So, I think keeping this momentum going is critically important. And I, for one, really very, very thankful that the NRF is stepping up to the podium and taking up this as an important contribution towards development in South Africa. So, I hope that we can go on and create these opportunities for many more years to come. Thanks, Sean.
Good, thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Just a quick one. Those that are asking, National Treasury was there throughout the workshop. They certainly expressed a lot of interest in everything that was being discussed, and for them, I believe it was a real positive input to the work that they're doing. So something that was shared is that they are starting different work streams, and they will certainly collaborate and look for input to the regulations which are underway and need to happen, and so look out for that, and we'll certainly continue with the platform that we've got here and all the stakeholders that we're working with to make sure that we do positively influence what goes into those regulations. Right, any questions, any specific questions that we've got? Thanks, Chris, for your, it was an eye-opener to learn others around the world are grappling with the same issues that we are. Fascinating, Chris. I mean, just the point on set-asides and what the US has learned and their experience, and I mean, I spoke to the Treasury, one of the Treasury officials, and she said, well, we've just seen the regulations and how we could actually put the regulations together, and so she was astounded that there's that level of input there. And for me, the output specifications, that was a big one. That just the extent to which output specifications is so much better as far as very complex PPP deals are concerned was a big one. So yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Any other thoughts or comments? Very good. Hello, Michael. You were very active last week, Michael. And,
yeah, I was quite fascinated by the presentation on systems engineering because it's not new.
Yeah.
The Americans actually refer to it as acquisition logistics. And there's the doyen of acquisition logistics is a fellow by the name of Benjamin Blanchard, who in one of his books actually explains how to specify the procurement of an aircraft carrier. I mean, he was mainly involved with military procurement, so it's rather secretive, but he does go through the process. And I mean, that's a piece of equipment that is probably worth as much as one of our very expensive power stations. And it has to be upgraded and be kept up to date for 50 years. So you can imagine what a minefield the specification is. And yet he goes through it in a methodical and I wouldn't say easy to understand, but in a way in which the process can actually be followed and understood. We've had these processes. I mean, SIPTM was the first one, FIPTM was the next one. And all we do is we actually reduce the complexity because we say, well, we don't have the people who can manage these systems, rather than saying, well, these are the systems that we must use. We must upskill the people to use them, rather than saying, well, we actually dumb the systems down to suit what we have.